The rain at Seattle-Tacoma does not wash things clean. It just makes everything look gray, like the world is dissolving into static. I stood at the check-in desk at 5 in the morning, watching the droplets race down the terminal window, my hand tightening around the handle of my carry-on. This was not a vacation. I was headlining the Global Tech Summit in Tokyo. It was the moment I had worked toward for 6 years in the shadows. I handed my passport to the agent, a woman with tired eyes and a coffee stain on her uniform. She scanned it. Then she frowned. She scanned it again. The typing stopped. She looked up at me, not with suspicion, but with pity. "I am sorry, Miss Evans," she said quietly. "I cannot let you board. This passport has been flagged in the system." I blinked, my voice steady. "Flagged? For what?" She turned the screen slightly away. "It has been reported stolen. The report was filed 2 hours ago by a Brenda Evans. She claimed you took it without permission and fled a domestic situation. Police have been notified to confiscate it." My stomach did not drop. It turned into ice. Brenda Evans. My mother. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One single vibration. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a text message that made the air in my lungs freeze. "You are the help, not the guest, Samantha. Get back here and prep the house for your sister's launch party. The police are already looking for the runaway. Do not embarrass us." I stared at the words. She had not just canceled a ticket. She had filed a false police report. She had committed a felony just to keep me in the kitchen. Stop scrolling for a second. If your own mother called the police to report your passport stolen just to stop you from succeeding, would you go home? Drop a yes or no in the comments right now. I looked at the agent. There was no argument. No pleading my case or explaining that I was 28 years old and hadn't lived with my parents in 4 years. I just nodded.
"Take it," I said.
The agent looked surprised. "Ma'am?" "Keep the passport," I said, my voice flat. "It is useless to me now." I turned around and walked away. This is the moment where most people would break. They would scream, they would cry, they would call their father begging for intervention. But I did not do any of that. I activated what psychologists call the gray rock method. It is a survival strategy. To survive a narcissist, you must become as uninteresting and impenetrable as a gray rock. You do not offer them fuel. You do not show emotion. You simply exist, hard and cold, until they break their own teeth trying to bite you. The automatic doors slid open to the freezing Seattle rain. Uber wasn't on the itinerary. Instead, I bypassed the line of Blacktown cars and luxury SUVs until I saw it. A rusted 1985 Ford pickup truck idling near the curb. The engine rattled like a box of loose bolts. The window rolled down. Walter leaned out, his face lined with grease and worry. He was a retired mechanic I had met 3 years ago when my car broke down on the highway. He was the only father figure I had who did not require a transaction fee for his affection. "They did it again?" he asked. I climbed into the passenger seat. The truck smelled like old leather and stale coffee. It was the smell of safety. "Last time, Walter," I said. He pulled into traffic. "Where to? The apartment?"
"No," I said.
"Take me to the lake house." Walter glanced at me. "Are you sure, Sam? If you go back there, they're going to eat you alive." I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim cab. I was not checking my email. I was logging into a secure, encrypted server that ran the back end of Ether systems. My fingers flew across the keyboard. "Let them try," I said. "They think they are dragging a runaway daughter back to the basement. They do not realize they just invited the executioner into the living room." I hit enter. A file named The Protocol opened on my screen. It was a list of assets, bank transfers, and legal deeds. "Walter," I said, staring at the numbers. "Initiate the transfer. We are accelerating the timeline." The drive to the lake house took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of silence inside the cab, while the wipers fought a losing battle against the storm. I watched the suburbs roll by, the houses getting larger, the fences getting higher, the lawns manicured into unnatural shades of green. To the world, and specifically to the people waiting for me inside that glass mansion, I was Samantha, the disappointment. The art school dropout who could not hack it in the real world. The one who lived in a basement apartment and drove a sedan with a taped-up bumper. They thought my silence at dinner parties was shame. They thought I kept to myself because I had nothing to brag about. They were wrong. I was quiet because I was busy. 6 years ago, while my sister Tiffany was curating her Instagram feed to look like old money, I was teaching myself Python and cloud architecture. While my father was leveraging the family home to fund his third failing consultancy firm, I was building Ether systems. It started as a simple encryption tool for remote workers. Then it grew. And then, 18 months ago, a conglomerate in Silicon Valley offered to buy it. The paperwork was signed on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, my net worth hit $142 million. There was no Lamborghini purchase. No screenshot posted to Instagram. I did exactly what a smart predator does. I camouflaged. Walter tapped the steering wheel. "We are 5 minutes out, Sam. You sure you want to walk in there? You own the place. You could just call the sheriff from here." I shook my head. Not yet. They need to understand who actually holds the keys. This is the part that usually confuses people. They ask, how could your parents live in a house you own and not know it? It is actually terrifyingly simple if you understand asset protection. Most people put their names on everything. They want the credit. They want the ego boost of seeing their signature on the deed. I wanted invisibility. I used what is called a double-blind LLC structure. I formed a holding company in Wyoming, a state that does not require the owners of an LLC to be listed on public records. Let us call it Company A. Then, I had Company A hire a law firm to act as the registered agent for a second company, Apex Holdings. That is Company B. When Apex Holdings bought the lake house from the previous owner, my name appeared nowhere. Not on the title, not on the tax records, not on the insurance. The only thing the public sees is a law firm in Cheyenne. So when my parents were facing foreclosure on their old place 3 years ago, and a property manager reached out to offer them a lease on this beautiful glass estate for a suspiciously reasonable rent, they did not ask questions. They just signed. They send their rent checks to Apex Holdings every month. They write complaint emails to a generic admin account. They have no idea that the admin reading those emails is me. I pulled up the ledger on my laptop. It was a beautiful spreadsheet. Every missed payment, every late fee, every violation of the lease agreement. My father liked to brag that he was the king of his castle. But in the eyes of the law, he was just a tenant with a bad credit score. And I was the landlord who had been letting him slide for way too long. We turned the corner. The iron gates of the estate loomed ahead, tall and imposing. My father had installed a gold plaque on the stone pillar that read the Evans Estate. It was a lie carved in metal. Walter stopped the truck at the gate. He reached for the keypad, but I stopped him. I pulled out my phone and opened the admin app for the security system. With one tap, the heavy iron gates groaned and swung open. "Let's go," I said quietly. Walter drove up the long, winding driveway. The house came into view, a modern masterpiece of steel and glass overlooking the water. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could see shadows moving inside, guests laughing, waiters carrying trays. My sister's launch party was in full swing. My mother wanted me to come home to scrub the floors. She wanted the help to arrive. But she had forgotten the most important rule of real estate. You never insult the person whose name is on the deed. I closed my laptop. The screen went black. "Park right at the front, Walter. Block the entrance." The contrast was almost funny. A line of leased Mercedes and BMWs lined the driveway, polished to a shine that cost more than my first car. And right in the middle of them, blocking the grand double doors, sat Walter's rusted, sputtering Ford pickup. I stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with humidity. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have a coat. I walked toward the front steps in my airport hoodie and jeans. The front door opened before I even reached the top step. It wasn't a guest. It was Brenda. My mother looked immaculate. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection. Her silk dress was a shade of blue that screamed, "Look at me," and her smile was plastered on like a sticker. But the moment she saw me, the sticker peeled off. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You're late," she hissed. She didn't look at the truck. She didn't look at Walter. She looked at me like I was a stain on her marble porch. And look at you. You look homeless. Hello, Mother, I said. My voice was calm. Gray Rock. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my bicep. Don't you hello mother me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Tiffany has influencers from LA inside. Real people, Samantha. People who matter. And here you are, dragging your failure to my doorstep in a junk truck. She reached behind a potted plant and pulled out a white apron.
She shoved it into my chest.
Put this on. The caterers are short-staffed. You're on tray duty. And for God's sake, use the service entrance around the back. If anyone asks, you're a cousin from out of town who needed work. There were no questions about the passport. No concern for my well-being. Just the assumption that I was broken. She assumed I had come crawling back because I had nowhere else to go. I'm not here to work, Brenda, I said, letting the apron fall to the ground. It hit the wet concrete with a soft flap. Her face turned a shade of red that clashed with the dress. Excuse me? You live under my roof, you follow my rules. You think because you ran away for a few years you're special? You're nothing. You have no job, no money, and no future unless I give it to you. Now pick that up.
Gary.
She shouted over her shoulder. Gary, get out here. Your daughter is having a delusional episode. My father appeared in the doorway. He was holding a scotch glass, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. He looked at the truck, then at me, and let out a bark of laughter. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he slurred. I thought you were going to Tokyo? What happened, Sam? Private jet breakdown? He laughed at his own joke. Brenda joined in, a sharp, cruel cackle. She's refusing to work, Gary, Brenda said. After everything we've done for her. Is that right? Gary took a step forward, looming over me. He loved this part. The intimidation. Let me tell you something, little girl. You're lucky we even let you in the gate. I've got big news tonight. Huge news. My firm just secured a mystery angel investor. We're talking millions. I'm going to be richer than God by midnight. So if you want a slice of that pie, you better pick up that apron and start serving. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes gleaming. Or you can get back in that rust bucket and drive off a cliff. Your choice. I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years, I had seen them as giants. Monsters who controlled my world. But standing there, in the cold, damp air, I realized something. They weren't monsters. They were just small, mean people standing in a house they didn't own, bragging about money they didn't have. I'll go inside, I said. Gary smirked. That's what I thought. Service entrance.
Now.
The foyer marble squeaked under my muddy sneakers as I breezed past them, ignoring the command to go around the back.
Hey.
Brenda shrieked. Where are you going? I didn't answer. I walked straight through the crowd of people holding champagne flutes, past the DJ booth, and headed for the basement stairs. But not to scrub floors. I was going to the guest room. I had left something there the last time I visited. Something important. A box. I closed the door to the basement suite behind me. The noise of the party muffled into a dull thumping bass. It smelled like mildew and neglect down here. This was where they made me stay whenever I visited, while the guest rooms upstairs sat empty. I knelt down and pulled a plastic bin from under the bed. I opened the lid. Inside were old sketchbooks, photos, and a thick manila envelope. I picked up the envelope. It was sealed with wax. My grandmother, Rose, had passed away 2 years ago. Brenda had told everyone that Rose died penniless. She told me that Rose had been senile and had written me out of the will because I was ungrateful. But Brenda didn't know that Rose and I had a standing lunch date every Sunday for 5 years. She didn't know that Rose was the one who encouraged me to learn code. And she certainly didn't know about the lawyer Rose hired a week before she died. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the last will and testament of Rose Evans. Item 1. To my son Gary and his wife Brenda, I leave my collection of ceramic cats, as they are the only things brittle and hollow enough to match their souls. Item 2. The entirety of my estate, including the liquid assets and the property holdings, is to be placed in a blind trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Samantha Evans. I smiled. It was a sad, tired smile. The house I bought. I didn't just buy it on the open market. I bought it from the trust. I essentially bought it for myself, moving money from one pocket to another, just to keep the secret. But there was another document in the box. A folded piece of paper I had printed out at the airport lounge before everything went wrong. It was a copy of the police report Brenda filed this morning. Incident type: theft. Suspect: Samantha Evans. Property: U.S. passport. Filing a false police report is a Class A misdemeanor in this state. But using it to restrict someone's freedom of movement? To coerce them into labor? That borders on human trafficking laws. My phone buzzed. It was a text from David, my lawyer. Foreclosure papers are ready. Sheriff is on standby. Do you want to proceed with the criminal filing? I looked at the ceiling. I could hear Tiffany's high-pitched voice on a microphone upstairs. I just want to thank you all for coming. Being a self-made woman is so hard, but I make it look good, right? Applause.
Cheers.
I typed back to David. Proceed with everything. I'm going upstairs. I stood up. I took off my hoodie. Underneath, I was wearing a black blazer I had packed for the summit. It was wrinkled, but it was tailored. It was sharp. I wasn't the help anymore. I was the CEO. And I was about to call a board meeting. The ascent from the basement felt symbolic. Every step up the stairs was a step out of the narrative they had written for me. With each squeak of my sneakers on the wood, I shed a layer of the scared little girl who just wanted to be loved. I reached the top of the stairs and pushed open the door to the main living room. The party was peaking. The lights were dimmed, a DJ was spinning a generic house beat, and about 50 people were crowded around a makeshift stage. Tiffany stood in the center, holding a microphone, basking in the glow of a ring light. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my first year of tuition, bought, no doubt, with a credit card I unknowingly paid off. It's just about hustle, Tiffany was saying, her voice breathless with fake humility. You have to manifest your reality. My parents taught me that if you want something, you just take it. Gary and Brenda stood in the front row, beaming. Gary held his scotch glass high. That's my girl. A chip off the old block. Navigating the crowd was like parting a sea of cheap cologne and ambition. Eyes forward. Ignoring the stares directed at my muddy sneakers, I mounted the platform. Tiffany stopped mid-sentence. She blinked, confused. Samantha? What are you doing? The kitchen is that way. A ripple of awkward laughter went through the room. Brenda lunged forward from the front row. Samantha.
Get down from there immediately.
I reached for the microphone in Tiffany's hand. She tried to pull it away, but I held firm. I looked her in the eye. It wasn't a glare. It was just a blank, bored stare. Let go, Tiffany, I said softly. She was so shocked she actually let go. The feedback whined for a second, silencing the room. The DJ cut the music. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with tension. Sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice amplified, calm and clear. I just wanted to add a footnote to Tiffany's speech about manifesting reality. Gary stepped onto the stage, his face purple. That's enough. You're drunk. Get off my stage before I throw you off.
It's not your stage, Gary, I said.
He froze. What did you say? I said it's not your stage. It's not your house. And as of... I checked my watch. 4 minutes ago you're trespassing. A murmur went through the crowd.
Phones were raised.
The influencers were live streaming this. Gary laughed, a nervous, barking sound. Don't listen to her. She's mentally unstable. We've been trying to get her help.
Apex Holdings, I said. Gary stopped laughing.
You pay rent to Apex Holdings Group, LLC. $4,500 a month. Although you haven't paid in 4 months, have you? You're $18,000 in arrears. Gary's eyes darted around the room.
How? How do you know that?
Did you snoop in my office?
I didn't have to snoop, I said.
I own Apex Holdings. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the folded deed I had brought from the basement. I held it up. My name is on the blind trust. My name is on the LLC. My name is on the deed to this house. Brenda shrieked. That's a lie. You're a broke little waitress. You couldn't afford a shed, let alone this place. And that, I said, turning to her, brings me to the second announcement. I turned back to Gary. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. You mentioned an angel investor earlier. A mystery backer who was going to save your firm with a $3 million injection. Gary nodded slowly, sweat beading on his forehead.
Yes.
Ether Systems. They signed the term sheet this morning. I am Ether Systems, I said. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the drinks. I founded it 6 years ago. I built it while you were calling me a failure. I sold it last year for $142 million. I kept a controlling interest specifically so I could vet incoming projects. I took a step closer to him.
I saw your pitch deck, Dad.
It was full of holes, bad math, and lies. But I approved the offer anyway. I wanted to give you one last chance. One chance to be a decent father. To treat me like a human being instead of a servant. I pulled out my phone and held up the screen. It showed the email notification from the police. But then you reported my passport stolen. You committed a felony to trap me here. You tried to make me a prisoner in my own property. I tapped the screen. Offer withdrawn. The deal is dead. Your firm is bankrupt. Gary staggered back as if I had physically punched him. He looked at Brenda. Brenda looked at the floor. Tiffany looked at her phone, horrified to see her live stream comments flooding with laughing emojis. You can't do this, Gary whispered. We're your family.
No, I said.
You're my tenants. And you just violated the lease. I pointed to the door. Get out. The sound of a party dying is a very specific noise. It is the clinking of glass being set down on tables, the shuffling of expensive shoes on hardwood, and the murmuring of 50 people realizing they are witnessing a funeral, not a launch. Within 3 minutes, the room was empty. The influencers fled first, terrified that the stink of bankruptcy would ruin their personal brands. Then the neighbors, the business associates, the caterers. They didn't say goodbye. They just vanished, leaving behind half-eaten canapes and the smell of expensive cologne. And then it was just the four of us. Me, standing on the stage. And them, standing in the ruins of their ego. This is the moment I want you to pay attention to. In psychology, there is a concept called narcissistic collapse. It happens when a narcissist's grandiose self-image is punctured by undeniable reality. When they can no longer deny the truth, they don't apologize. They don't reflect. They crumble into a frantic, pathetic state of bargaining and victimization. I watched it happen in real time. Gary's face went from purple to a sickly gray. The arrogance was gone. The bully was gone. In his place was a desperate old man realizing he had just lost his ATM. Sammy, he stammered, using a nickname he hadn't used in 20 years. Sammy, listen. We can fix this. You're upset. We get it. But you can't just throw us out. This is our home. It's my asset, I corrected. And it's a non-performing one. Brenda switched tactics instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a performance of weeping motherhood. She clasped her hands together. We did it for you, she sobbed, though there were no tears. The passport. We just wanted you close. We missed you. We were worried about you traveling all alone to Tokyo. It was an act of love, Samantha. Doesn't a mother's love count for anything? I pulled out my phone. I didn't speak. I just hit play on a voice memo I had recorded 5 hours ago when I was standing outside the kitchen door, listening to them before I went to the basement. Brenda's voice rang out from the tiny speaker, tinny but clear. Call the police and tell them she stole the passport. If she leaves, who's going to cater the party? I'm not paying a service. Just trap her here until the weekend, then we'll kick her out again. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a mask shattering. That doesn't sound like love, Brenda, I said quietly. That sounds like a felony. Specifically, filing a false police report and false imprisonment. I walked down the steps of the stage and stood in front of them. You have 2 choices. Choice A, you leave right now. You take your clothes, you take your car, and you go. Choice B, I call the sheriff back in here, I play this recording, and we add criminal charges to the eviction notice. Tiffany was the first to move. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at her parents. She grabbed her purse and ran out the front door. The golden child, abandoning the ship the moment it took on water.
Gary looked at me one last time.
There was no fatherly pride, just hatred. The hatred of a man who knows he has been beaten by someone he considered beneath him.
You're cold, he spat.
You have ice in your veins. I learned from the best, I said. They left. They didn't pack boxes. They didn't take the furniture. They walked out the front door into the dark, wet driveway, got into Gary's leased sedan, and drove away. I stood there for a long time. I waited for the guilt to hit. I waited for that familiar pang of shame, the voice in my head that said I was a bad daughter. But it never came. Instead, the front door opened again. Walter walked in. He was holding a large, greasy pepperoni pizza box and a six-pack of cheap soda. He looked around the massive, empty living room with its panoramic view of the dark lake. Place looks better already, he said. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 years. My shoulders dropped. The armor fell off. Yeah, I said. It really does. We sat on the $5,000 Italian white leather sofa, eating greasy pizza and drinking soda out of the can. The house was quiet. No screaming. No demands. No fake laughter. Just the sound of the rain against the glass and the feeling of absolute, terrifying, beautiful freedom. They wanted me to stay in the basement. They wanted me to be the foundation they walked on. They never stopped to think that if the foundation moves, the house comes down. I took a bite of pizza and looked out at the water. I had missed my flight to Tokyo. I had missed the summit. But sitting there, in the quiet empire I had built, I knew I had arrived exactly where I was supposed to be. Samantha played the long game and won. But was evicting them enough, or should she have pressed charges? Type justice if you think she did the right thing. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of the underdog winning.